Hey everyone, welcome to today's live section. We are going to be making a succulent garden, right? So we're going to use cupcakes and we're going to pipe some large like the one I have here and some small ones and put them together in combination on cupcakes to make this cool effect of a beautiful little succulent garden when you pair all those cupcakes together. So we're going to go over a few things. The first is we're going to talk about the colors that you're going to want to make succulents, and we're going to make one. And it's a really easy thing to do where you can just dial it back and put in less for lighter shades and add more for darker ones. So we're just going to make one, and we have a couple of different versions of it to show you so you get an idea of what to make for your succulents. And then we're going to pipe a couple of different varieties. So we're going to use different tips to achieve different effects very easily with those colors to make some different succulents. And we're going to do some of them really tiny and use our flower nail, and we're going to do some of them large like this one, so you have some bigger cupcakes, some larger succulents. It's also a little easier because this is just piping one, so it's the same amount of work as piping those little ones, and you don't need 3 or 4 of them to fill up the top of a cupcake. And then we're going to talk about assembling your details and finishing them. So taking those tiny details we made on our flower nail and then putting them onto our cupcakes so we have this finished appearance. So we'll do some finishing. So to start off with, we're going to talk about the color. And as you can see, we have this sagey green kind of color, right? So I think of it as kind of that succulent green, slightly different than sage, but when I look at it, I see more blue than yellow, right? Because we're making green, so we're going to use blue and yellow. And I see a little bit of that gray, so that dullness that adding a little bit of black to your colors is going to give you, right? So it's kind of like that low chroma shade of a nice minty green that has a little more blue than yellow. So to do that, we're going to use some royal blue. So I'm just going to get some out here on my lid. Some lemon yellow. And just a tiny bit of our coal black. So blue, yellow, and black. It's going to be more blue than yellow and just a little bit of that black. And since I don't need a lot of color, I'm going to just use toothpicks to kind of dab that in. So I've got some white buttercream here, and I'm just going to start with a couple of specks of blue, and I'm looking to make kind of a medium shade like what I've got over there, but I'm just going to start with less. So if you're not sure about how much color something is going to take to achieve the effect that you want, less is better at first than more, because it's easier to add more color if you feel like the shade itself is going in the right direction and you just need a more intense or saturated hue, right? Just a little bit of that black. And we can mix it around and just check it out. Something too dark, right? It's either a matter of remixing the color and wasting buttercream, adding whitener, or adding more buttercream to it to lighten it up. And that can really create a lot of waste. So you can see right there, we've got a nice light shade of that color. We just need to bump it up a little bit. So I'm gonna just keep adding some more. Until I get to that desired darkness. So I'm kind of using 3 specks of my royal to every 2 specks of my lemon and 1 kind of really little tiny one of that black. You have to kind of be careful with the black. It can really creep up on you, and you want it to be green with that kind of hint of the gray, not to be gray that looks sort of greenish, because that gets into a whole kind of Halloween vibe. Right, where we look like rotting moss or something like that. And we can see we're getting there. It's looking lovely. We've got a beautiful effect. Just maybe do that same thing that I did. It was 6 royal, 4 lemon, and 2 my little black again, and I should be right where I need to be. And it's important, take your time when you're mixing your colors. Don't rush through them. Rushing is a good way to end up with something completely funky, and I find that's usually when I do it. I rarely ever mix a color that I have to just trash and start all over again anymore, but every once in a while I find when I'm in a hurry, things can go to a kind of wonky place. Happens to everybody. So if you have some color mixing fails, especially if you're just getting started on your cake decorating journey, it's totally normal. We've all done it. And I think this is going to be a really beautiful shade. You can see it's more blue than yellow. It's got that hint of that gray, so it really gives us that succulent vibe. And as it deepens and develops, it's going to get quite a bit darker. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Your colors will develop with time. So you want to stop a little short of where you want that endpoint to be. And I always say, look at the areas that are shadowy. So kind of run your spatula or your spoon through and kind of look at that little darkest cave. That's a good indication of where your color is going to go. It's going to get quite a bit darker, right? It's going to deepen a few shades. So I think we'll be really close to that nice medium tone. And we've mixed a few other colors that we did yesterday. So we have a light version of this, so it's much lighter than our medium tone is going to be, right? And you can see, especially next to the one that we piped yesterday, it's significantly lighter. It's going to give it that kind of like ice plant vibe to it. And we've also got a darker version. So for this, I used drops. So same proportion, drops of royal blue, drops of lemon, and a little bit of black to get like a deep kind of foresty green that I'm going to use for kind of some segmented cactuses. And then I have a few other little colors just to talk about quickly. I've got some white in a bag that I'm going to use to put little spines on my cactus, and just some light pink that I'm going to use for some little cactus flowers, and we'll go over the tips that we're using on those later. And then for the base of my cupcakes, I have some brown, and it's just a very simple color. I'm going to use this brown just to spread across the top of my cupcakes. You can see it's very dark. It's a mixture of buckeye brown, which is going to give you a nice kind of warm brown. And if you want it to look more like soil, just adding a little black. It's going to give it that depth and darkness that's going to make it look like that really rich potting soil, right? So we're going to get started and talking about the different kinds of succulents that we're going to make. And I'm going to just do the first part on paper so that we have a good idea of what we're making, right? And the technique that we're going to use, and then I'm going to do it on the flower nail afterwards. So I'm going to talk about the type of succulent and then the technique, and then we're going to do an actual little succulent on our flower nail so that you can see those. And I've got some that I pre-made yesterday so that they're nice and firm and easy to move on to our actual cupcakes later. So we're going to start with our number 352 tip. I have that right here. There we go. So I've got it with my darkest green. You can of course use it with any color green. And that's actually a really nice way to create some faux varieties. So if you're doing these and you think some of them are too advanced, but maybe this one, because it's definitely the easiest, right? We're just piping a series of leaves that are gonna go from larger to smaller. You can always just make a couple of different colors and pipe these with a few different colors, and you create that faux sense of variety. So we're gonna make what I'm gonna say is pronounced Aconium with these. That's what's inspiring us. So it's those succulents. They kind of have those little leaves. They're fatter at the base. They've got a little point right at the end. And the leaves on these are going to get smaller as they go towards the center, right? And they've got just a little bit of height at the center. So that's kind of the vibe or the look that we're going for with these. So in order to do that, I'm going to take this leaf tip. So it's a 352. It's this one. It's got a little kind of opening that's shaped like a V. If you never use these, I love using these for leaves. They're a little bit easier to use than the W-style ones because the points can't get smashed together. You don't have to wiggle them back open. So they're just a little easier to care for and maintain sometimes than the W-shaped ones. You're going to hold the bag at a 45-degree angle and just touch down with one of those points. All you then need to do is squeeze until you get a nice fat base, as fat as you want, and then pull while you're still squeezing. So a little bit opposite of a lot of techniques when piping, but you can see gives you a nice little leaf. Let's see if I can get that in focus. There we go. And the faster you pull, the sharper that transition is going to be, right? So if I pulled away slowly, it would give me a more gradual change between the fat area and the short area. And if you want it to be sharp, go from really fat quickly to that point, you just pull quickly, right? So it can take a little practice to get that pull rate down, but once you do, it's a very easy way to, one, make leaves, and two, to combo together to make succulents. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pull my flower nail over, and I'm gonna pipe all of these, right, on parchment paper so that they're easy to transfer over to a tray. I can then put them in the fridge and they'll be set up nice and firm and easy to transfer to my cupcakes. So the first thing I'm gonna do is pipe just a little bit of a buildup in the center, and that's gonna allow us to build a little bit of height to the succulent. And in order to do this, you can make a separate bag. I find with the succulents, it's better if the color on the inside matches the color on the outside, because you're not always completely covering it up. And this means you don't have to go in and fill in any gaps. So I actually just take my leaf tip, hold it straight up and down, and just spin it around a little bit. It makes kind of a little funky spiral, but that's enough to build this up on, especially with a small one, right? So it doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be enough frosting for those little leaves to attach to. And I'm gonna start at the bottom, right? So at the base, again, right? I'm holding my nail in one hand, other hand is kind of out here if you imagine a clock face at about 3 o'clock. And I'm just gonna keep this hand in the same place, right? So 45-degree angle to my nail, squeeze out nice and big, and pull away quickly. And if they overlap a little bit, that's fine, right? You don't have to worry about that. So nice and fat. Great little points. I'm gonna go on top of those, in between two of them, so start between two leaves, and I'm just gonna go a little smaller. And we get our second little ring there. And you can see it's already taking shape. It's giving us that nice little spiky vibe from the side. Once you get to the third one, start just pulling your tip up just a little bit. So from that 45-degree angle, just go up to about, I don't know, 65, 75. We're not quite all the way up and down, but just so that it's easier to get those last few points in there, just change that angle a little bit. And that's a really simple style of succulent. You can do it in multiple different colors and just use these. So really easy to do, number 352 tip. All right, so that covers our little Aeonium. We'll move on to our segmented cactus. And while I get this ready, I'm actually gonna have Tom pull over some cupcakes that I did. And so these are just gonna be meant to look like little cactuses. And I'm gonna use a 21 tip because it's gonna give me those nice ridges on it. And the idea here is I'm just gonna pipe dots, right? And you can do a dot, or you can do your dots, let it sit, pipe another one on top, and you can make this kind of build up of those little dots and make essentially a cute little segmented cactus that has multiple parts. Sometimes I'll also do a line, right? I've got some nice stiff buttercream, and make some of those little tall looking cactuses as well. And you can kind of group them together so that they have a little extra stability because they're gonna be kind of tall and wobbly. And usually then I'm doing these on the cupcakes that are those tiny little succulent gardens. I'm putting other elements around them so they're not kind of freestanding. They've got other stuff supporting them. And this is also where I'm gonna use my number 2 or 1 tip with my white to do some spikes, and my number 16 to do some flowers. So we've got our little bags ready to go. And I'm gonna have Tom pull over our tray. That one.
Someone on the live also asked, do they need to use parchment? I tell them they probably need to.
Oh, on your flower nail, yes, use parchment because it'll allow you to move them easily. Typically, I put them onto a tray like this and pop them in and out of the fridge, so it's gonna be much easier if you pipe them on parchment. If your buttercream is stiff enough or you're using a different kind and you can transfer them directly to your cupcakes, then of course you don't have to, but I like doing them in big rounds right? So I'll do all of my Aonium style ones, and then I'll go in and do all my Echeveria style ones, so that I've got a huge, kind of amount on the tray to work from, and then put them all on the cupcakes at the end, rather than changing up between bags, because it's just a little more efficient from a production standpoint. But if you're just doing this for fun at home and your buttercream is stable enough that you can take it directly from the nail onto the cupcake, then no, you don't have to. But from a production standpoint, I find the paper is much, much easier, just because we tend to do things for larger orders. So that's a bit of personal preference, but I find especially to begin with, the paper can make it a little easier because it allows you to handle them a little bit easier and to put them in the fridge or the freezer to get them really cold. And that's an excellent question, so thank you for that. So I prepped these yesterday with some brown buttercream, and you can see I've done single dot there. I let them chill in the fridge for a minute, and then I put another one on top, and you can see nice and stable. And then I went ahead and did a third one. So you can get actually like 3 or 4 of these little kind of dots going on there. So you get that kind of little bulbous, bulging cactus look. And they've got those nice defined ridges on them. So anytime I do this, I try to, get it piped, give it 10, 15 minutes, however long it needs. It's going to vary a bit on the day, how soft your buttercream is, how warm or cold your environment is, but it's really easy then to just go back in rounds and put another little dot on top, right? Anytime we want to finish them off, there's a variety of little things we can do. I can use my pink, right? So there's just a little fleck of neon bright pink and some white buttercream, and you can use that to do another little star on top, get a little flower, right? Really sweet and easy. Or even to go more detailed. And this, definitely time consuming. We're doing little dots on here, so just follow the little ridges. And since this has been in the fridge overnight, it's nice and hard. I'm also using an American style buttercream, so it crusts just a little bit. So that crust is actually going to give us a little extra kind of firmness and stability. So if you're doing something like this, it's actually quite nice for these kinds of details. And I can just follow those little lines up and give my little cactus some little spikes. And this is cute because it adds just a little bit of white, and I'm trying to go really fast. So I feel like my dots are really sloppy, but you can always take your time, go in, do nice kind of little perfect dots. You can pull them a little bit. Sometimes I like to do that with the cactuses, just to give it that little spiky feel. Sometimes they miss the ridge a little bit. There we go. So you can see it all of a sudden looks really crazy, really cool, really detailed. You have those little spikes coming off your little cactuses, and it's just looking adorable, right? So there's those 2 things that we're doing. First, just a dot, and then you can also pull a line. So for the dot, it's really just pull that tip up off the surface or above the one below it. Squeeze until you get a nice full star, right? And then stop and pull away. It's very simple, very slow motion. If you want to pull a straight little line or maybe do a fun little one next to it, just go there, let it hit its full volume, and then just pull up. And you can pull straight up so you get straight lines, or you can kind of let it sit a little bit so it wriggles a little bit, and that'll give it kind of a little bit of a wavy, kind of ruffled effect to it. So these are really easy to do as well, and they're easy to take up some area, right? And then we put in a few of those little Aoniums and Echeveria succulents, maybe a little spiky one, and you're all finished. And that little bit of detail with those little spikes on the cactus or just putting on a little flower adds a little bit of color, right? Instead of being all green, all brown. It adds just a little bit of fun and sparkle.
So somebody asked, can you show the little cupcake close-up once you pipe it?
Oh, sure. Now let me show this. So you can see this one is just the 3 segments on top of each other, and I put a little star with a 16 on top. And then this one, I put the little spikes on. So they're kind of, there we go, wild and crazy. And it just adds that little bit of white against that darker color. And then it has the little flower on top. So you can do any kind of combination of them. You can leave them plain, do some segmented and some just long, kind of like those freestanding cactuses you see American Southwest. Or you can do the little segmented ones, or you can combo them together. When you do things close together like this, it's gonna help give the first one a little bit of support, and then we're gonna put some other stuff right there in it, right? I think that should be good. I'm gonna pass these back to Tom, but we'll bring them out later. I'm gonna put more details on them, and I'll make sure to show you up close as well. There we go. Just wanna make sure he doesn't drop that tray. So it's really easy with your 21 tip. Just straight up and down, up off the surface, squeeze till you get a nice full star, stop, and then just pull away, right? And then we're just kind of layering that on top of itself. So anytime I'm doing these, I'll put all my cupcakes out. They've got all their brown frosting on them. Anyone where I want to put on one of these segmented cactuses, I go and I put a dot, I pop them in the fridge, give them a few minutes, pull them out, put on the second layer, do the same thing, repeat it, put on the third. And if you want to pull some tall cactuses next to them, just let it hit that full volume, right? And then pull up nice and slow. If you go fast, you'll get straight lines. If you go really slow like I'm doing right now, you'll get kind of ridged ones. And you can build some cute little faux cactuses like that. It's really easy to do, right? So that is our 21 tip. I'm gonna pull over my next little page, and we'll start with the Echeveria or Echeveria. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce this. Latin's not my thing. But I'm gonna use the 104 tip or the 125, and that depends on whether I wanna do it large or small. So I've got 2 bags for this little job, right? And get some stuff out of the way. But these are just gonna be easy, kind of like you're piping a flower. So a traditional flower, but it doesn't have to look like a set thing, right? So it's not like a rose or something like that where you really have to follow a form or a pattern. You just kind of have to get enough of those petals on there, get them approximately the right shape, and kind of put those little kind of overlapping ones in the center, and you get a nice feel like a succulent. So it's a very, very easy petal to do. And I'm gonna make sure my bag is flowing, get my tip cleaned. We're going to use either a 104 tip or 125 tip, but we're really using the same technique for both of these. Fat end is gonna be towards the center, skinny end is gonna be out, and to start with, it's almost gonna be flat on your flower nail or your cupcake. So it's really just a matter of pulling, right? A little rectangular petal almost. I don't really necessarily want to pull and finish with like a tapered edge. Having kind of like a fat, chunky rectangle is almost ideal with these. So we want to go for a vibe where the petals have almost this kind of like trapezoidal shape to them. And they're not necessarily going to have the same smooth tapered edges that, say, a rose petal would. But honestly, for succulents, if you know how to pipe roses, you could almost pipe a rose in green and have a very similar look. So they look almost kind of like those big green cabbages you get at winter time that are kind of those decorative elements in landscaping. So I'm going to pull over my flower nail first and do one on here, and then I'll show you how easy it is to take the same technique, pull out a cupcake, and do it large. So just get a little buttercream on there. And again, I'm gonna start straight up and down. I'm just gonna pipe a little mound right here. Let me spin it around a little bit, give myself a little buildup of frosting to pipe these on. To begin with, I'm just gonna start almost against the surface, right? So I've got the fat end, so it's touching my little mound, skinny end is out, and it's really just rock it up a little bit off that surface. So as I come to the end, I'm just gonna pull up a little bit with it. So you can see that on the side, I went almost flat, And then at the end, I just pulled the tip up a slightly bit. So it's got a slight up curve to it. And this allows you to nest the next one underneath if you want. Especially as you come back to the beginning. So I like kind of like nice, sharp little stops to those petals. So kind of give it almost a little yank there at the end. And then as I go for my second layer, I'm just gonna go on top. And as I'm coming towards the center, you can see I'm gonna take that outside edge of the petal and just start rotating it up. So kind of like you would a normal flower, as you start doing the petals in the center, you're gonna pull that up, and that's gonna give you that open look to it, right? And the depth and the spacing between those petals. When I get to the center, I'm literally just gonna take this tip straight up and down and pull up as I pipe. And that's gonna give me those little petals in the middle, and it gives me that look like a nice little Echeveria or Echeveria, however you say that style, succulent. So really easy to do. They kind of look like tiny little green cabbages, but they're fantastic, and they're gonna look really, really great on our cupcakes. So I'm gonna put this off to the side, put my flower nail off to the side, pull out my inspiration for my cupcake, and I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing. I think I just need to reload my buttercream in my bag, so it's a good time to check in with Tom and see if anyone else had any questions.
The other thing is, at the end, you would just show all the tips again, you know.
Oh, sure. It will definitely do that. I'll go over which tips I used for which elements and show them to you all again. Just want to get this bag loaded up really quickly. I'll make sure that Tom reminds me too. I get too excited about cake sometimes and then I forget about things. All right. So with the big ones that you're doing on cupcakes, they're gonna take a lot more buttercream. So it's just something to keep in mind, especially if you're just practicing. Sometimes it's fun just to do the small ones on the flower nail, build up your confidence a little bit before you start using larger amounts of buttercream. Also too, I find anytime you've got multiple elements on a cupcake, people are looking at less at the details, you know, each specific little detail in it. And it's a little easier to hide any kind of mistakes and flubs. So it's just something to keep in mind. The more detail they have, the less precise you really need to be in some ways, right? So you can get away with a few more mistakes, a few more little kind of things with the small ones. So same thing, right? So just squeeze out a nice little mound of buttercream there in the middle, because we want something for these petals or leaves or whatever you want to call them to attach to. And we're going to start the same way. So almost flat against the surface, right? This is a 125 tip, so it's just a larger version of our 104. It's kind of that decorator size. So flat against the surface, and then just pull up a little bit at the end, right? That allows me a little space to get the next petal underneath. So flat and then up a little. And usually when I'm doing these on the flower nail, I only need about 4 petals, but sometimes when I'm going on the cupcake, it gives you a little more space and you might need 5. So just do whatever it takes to fill up that area. And then second layer, I'm just gonna come right here. Oh, sorry, some things. Giving me little thready edges on the end. There we go. And you can see as I work my way up that little ball of frosting, I'm just taking that outside edge of that tib and putting it closer to like 12 o'clock, noon. And I'm just putting a petal anywhere there needs to be one. So anywhere I've got a little space to fill, anywhere it looks like it needs a petal. And then last few, I've got a weird, awkward little space in the middle. If I can, I'll fill it with my 125. If it's really tiny, I'll take my 104 bag and just fill that in, right? So sometimes you get a little space there in the middle. It just needs a few little dabs, and there's not really room to get that 125 tip in there. If you keep a small bag on hand, it'll do the job as well, right? So that gives us a larger version of essentially the same succulent. And you can see my buttercream from today is still a little lighter. It hasn't quite developed in color, but it's very easy then to visualize if you made the same colors, you know, similar colors, different tones, different shades, different values. You can pipe a whole bunch of these and put them together, and it's gonna look very varied without really having to do any different work or really use any different bags. So it's an easy way to create that sense of false variety. So this is the same succulent with just the larger tip, and you can see then it's very easy to pipe these. It's the same amount of time and work really as doing the small ones. It's just gonna take more buttercream to cover a cupcake, but it'll be a little bit quicker in terms of the amount of time it takes you. So we'll put those to the side and pull over our next one. So it's gonna be like a Gasteria style succulent, and these, the petals on these are kind of fat, right? And they have almost a little bit like blunt ends. So I'm actually going to use my 101 tip and do this. And my goal is to get these kind of almost like, I would say like shovel-like kind of spikes coming off of it. So it's going to look a little chunkier, a little funkier. It's going to be very similar to some other things that we're going to do, because we're going to do some little spike style ones with a number 5 tip. But it's going to be very simple and very easy. So I have my 101 tip, and I'm going to use it the way I would use a leaf tip. So it doesn't matter which direction you hold the back end and the front end on this, because we're not using those to create petals in the traditional way. I'm actually going to use it, hold it at a 45-degree angle to the surface. I usually put the fat in towards myself, but honestly with this, it doesn't really matter. And squeeze a nice fat buildup and then just pull. And you can see then it's gonna give me this kind of flat spike, right? You can see it's got a nice tapered edge to it, and it's got this kind of like blunt end there. So it's essentially just creating a different style of petal or leaf on these, but we're gonna use the same technique we did with the first ones with the Aeoniums in that number 352 tip. So basically holding it at a 45-degree angle, we're gonna pipe a buildup in the center, and then we're gonna pipe these flat spikes coming out all the way around, and then we're gonna do layers till we get to the center. So first step, hold it straight up and down, right off the surface, give ourselves a nice little buildup of frosting to work with, right? It doesn't have to be too tall, it doesn't have to be too fat, right? If you make it bigger, you're just making a bigger version. If you make it smaller, you're just making a smaller one. And then hold that bag, 45-degree angle, build up a little base, and pull a spike. And these plants have kind of a wild and varied look to them, and they're not necessarily in the same kind of cluster-like flowers that the regular ones are. So if you get a little crazy with these flat spikes, it's actually a little truer to life. But basically, this gives us a little kind of altered looking one, right? It's got these kind of fat wedges to it, and it gives us that just different look to them. But also very simple technique. It's basically just holding your bag at 45 degrees, squeezing, hold for a hot second just to build up a little base, and then pull so you get that nice kind of thin petal to it. You can see it gives us that nice kind of rounded natural look. And that's an easy kind of Gasteria style succulent. All right. So our last little element here is going to kind of resemble a Haworthia, And these have these just really, really thin kind of tapered spikes to them. There's usually kind of ribbing or striping on them, which you can't really get that effect, but I like doing them two-toned. So you can see I've taken my medium and my light color, put it in the same bag. Very easy to stripe a bag. Just take a small spatula, right, one of your offset ones with one color, smear it against one side, and then fill it on the other side with that second color, right? So pretty easy to do. It's going to give you a nice variation. So we've got two colors coming out. I don't really care about what's on top, what's on bottom. It's just nice to have that little bit of variety. It adds just a little bit of depth, a little bit of change in color, and it's just nice. So I don't necessarily care that they're in the bag neatly or not, right? If they blend together a little bit, it's fine. It's just kind of wanting those different colors in there a little bit, just to add a little bit of depth and variety. So we're going to do the similar thing that we just did, where we're going to pipe a dot in the center, and then we're going to pipe spikes. So we want to build up a dot and then pull away. So quicker is going to give you skinnier, kind of quicker transitions, right? If you go slower, right, pipe that build up and then pull slower, you're going to get fatter, kind of cleaner transitions, right? It's slower transition versus a quick one. So pulling away quickly gives me a really thin, kind of spidery thread-like one, and pulling away slower gives me a slower transition on that line. So you can kind of control, and even between these, depending on how fast you want to pull, you can create a different effect where it's got thinner, more spindly little spikes coming off versus fatter, thicker, chunkier ones. So pull my flower nail over again. I'm going to use my number 5 tip, just pipe a nice big dot there in the center to start building up on. And I'm maybe going to make it so that the dark half is kind of down when I'm piping. So I've got the darker buttercream facing towards the flower nail. Hold that bag at a 45-degree angle and just start squeezing, right? So build up my little dot, pull a spike. So I think I'm going to go for some fatter ones. So I'm just going to move nice and slow and just give it a little yank there on the end. And it can take some time to really work out your rate and get that control. But this is a great one to practice on because they don't all have to be perfectly the same. So 45 degrees works for a second layer as well. But as you go to that third, fourth, depending on how many layers you want to do, you're going to start pulling then straight up, right? Just make some quick tiny ones there in the middle. And so if I went faster with my pulls, I would get a thinner, threadier look to these. And you can actually do these on the nail or use them to kind of bind things together on your cupcakes. And I'll show you how to do that when we go to putting them together. And just pipe them directly on the cupcakes. So sometimes anywhere I need a little bit of something in between two little details, I'll pull a few of these quick little spikes. So not even bothering to do the center, just pulling a few quick ones because it gives the idea of a succulent without actually having to do a ton of work, and it can kind of help glue everything together on your cupcake and make everything look like a tiny, cute little packed-in succulent garden. So that covers our different separate elements that we're gonna put onto our cupcakes. And I have some that I pre-piped yesterday and put in the fridge so they'd be nice and firm for me to play with. But the first thing I'm gonna show you how to do before we get to pulling those out is how to put frosting on your cupcake. So you have your cupcakes. I've got some brown here. Right, so that brown that I showed you earlier at the beginning, it's just a mixture of Buckeye brown and coal black with some buttercream. You could even use, you know, say chocolate ganache or something like that if that goes with the flavor of your cake. But for today, we're just using buttercream, but everybody loves ganache. So you just want to make sure that that's nice and pliable, well mixed. And I'm going to take my tapered spatula and just grab a nice little bit there on the end. So it's maybe like a tablespoon of frosting. Take my cupcake. I'm just gonna push that down on the top. I'm gonna use the rounded edge here just to push it out flat, right? You can see right like that. And spin as you go around. And if you need to, add more frosting, adjust how you're holding it in your hand. The idea here is just to get that look of like dirt on top of the cupcake. Also to make sure that you've got a layer of frosting all across the top of that cupcake. You know, try and go towards the edge of those papers so that you're really sealing the moisture in your cupcakes, because we don't want to just put a bunch of little succulents on top, especially if you're using something like chocolate cupcakes. You know, it's gonna look fine, but if you give yourself little gaps where that cake is exposed, it's kind of drying out. So if these are gonna sit out for a little bit, especially for an event, if you're making something this fancy, that's most likely the case. You wanna make sure that they've got a nice little layer of something on there, whether it's buttercream or ganache, that's gonna really keep the moisture sealed into them, because it's great if they look pretty, but it's even better if they taste wonderful and are moist when you go to eat them. So that's just a really simple way. It takes just about a tablespoon of buttercream, just nice flat pressure, and just use that rounded edge just to push it towards the edge. And you can see it gives us a nice little look like dirt. We have kind of like a little built up rim around the edge with that. It's just really easy to push that frosting there and give myself a surface to put all these cute little details on. And I have some that we did the cactuses on from before, from yesterday, along with some cute little details. And I'm going to show you how to put them all together. So I'm going to ask Tom to pull those out of the fridge, and I'll just talk for a few seconds and get myself a sip of water while he's doing that. And we'll pull those details over. And then we'll finish up by going over the tips that we're using, right? So I've got some cute little details that I piped yesterday. Woo! And we have got our cupcakes that we did our little cactuses on earlier, right? So if your cupcakes are firm like this, right, my brown is nice and firm versus just being spread on, you'll probably need to use a little bit of buttercream. So I've got my bag with my 5-tip, because I'll most likely use it to pull a few spikes in between as well to help me attach details. So I'm gonna just go ahead and start with maybe our cute one, right, our little cactus that has the spikes. And I just wanna think about what I wanna use, maybe like one of my Echeverias and a little spike or something like that. We'll just go ahead and see. So I want to kind of vary not only what I'm putting on there in terms of the design element, so basically what tip that I've used, right? So it's just very easy once they're on the paper and they're nice and firm. You can use a spatula, right? Whichever one you're comfortable with. And it's really easy then just to get those right on there. And since they're nice and cold, you can see it's easy. I can just manipulate that really quickly. Just twist it so it's in a nice spot so it fits and tucks into that cactus, right? And then it's also going to support that little cactus as well. So I want to vary not only the design, but also the color. So we want to get things of a different color kind of next to each other. So I might just go ahead and pull some quick little spikes right there, and then put one of those darker ones, the little Aconiums that I did with the 352, right up front. So just really quickly pull some cute, quick little spikes. And I'm gonna give myself a little dot right there, and I'm gonna pull over. Let's see, this one's nice and tiny. And since they're nice and firm, it's actually really easy. I can even just handle them with my fingers to a certain extent. But you can see that gives us a cute little adorable look. Nice little succulent garden. We've got some different textures going on from the different tips. We've got different colors, right? And anywhere you think it needs it, anywhere you think it needs some support or anything else, I can also pull over my little 101 tip and pull some cute little flat spikes as well. You can just go in, right? and add those little details. I'm gonna get this nice and close so you can see it. Oh, there we go, we're in focus now. So you can see I've got cute little Echeveria, Aeoniums, I've got a little traditional style cacti, and that little Haworthia over there, right? And we've got a cute little succulent garden. You start pairing them together with the larger ones, and you've got this great little varied look to them. So I'm just gonna go ahead and finish a few more. And by really using the different tips, the different colors, you can really create a different look for yourself. And I love making some of them really teeny tiny, some of them larger. So you get some where it feels like they have kind of like oversized details that are spilling out and kind of pouring off, versus others where all of the little succulents feel really, really tiny and petite. It's gonna give you some nice variety as well. So you can see when I pair things of the same color next to each other, they kind of blend together more, versus if I put something there that was more of the medium shade. So you can kind of play around with the colors too, making some more monotone and having the same value versus really changing up those values on the cupcakes. Adorable as well, right? And I'll pull this one over and we'll get some more detail going on here, because this one is kind of my little plain cactus. So cute. And I think I'm going to leave a little hole in there, and I'm just going to do some of those cute little spikes in the middle. So as you're going, just kind of build them and have things kind of fit in wherever. And if you need to, it's a really great way to kind of stick everything together and have it all joined together, is just to pull some of those spikes. So anywhere it needs it, you can go in and kind of fill in with those as well. So you can see this one is just all green. There's no white, there's no pink on it. It looks very monotone, but it still looks very pretty. So those are kind of three very easy ways to give yourself a natural variety and variation. These cute little cupcakes, right? Some of them just have the pink, some of them have none, some of them have the pink and white, but it looks all really kind of different and unique. It'll make each of your cupcakes look different and unique if you do some with, some without. Mix up the different types of succulents you put on them in different colors, and just have yourself a lot of variety. I love piping a ton of little details on my flower nail before I do these, having a few trays laid out so that I can pick and choose the right sizes, colors, whatever I need when I'm building these. And it makes it really fun, kind of entertaining, and it gives yourself, you know, a nice little sense of variety in these. And then when you pair them together with some of the larger ones, it really helps to create a beautiful and kind of varied look for them. So I'm just gonna get the other one out here. So you can see overall, that gives you a really nice presentation together. So if you're looking to set up like a dessert table setup, mixing them together on the same trays or plates, putting the big ones on some cake stands and the smaller tiny ones with lots of details on others, it's a great way to kind of play around with that variety. And even though it's the same techniques, you're getting a really varied, beautiful, detailed look that really kind of gives you a lot of, I'd say, bang for the buck in terms of your energy, labor, and efforts. And so we had the request to go over the different tips. I'll pull out my little sample practice piping and show you those. So we had, our first one was the Aonium style, and we used the number 352. So it is a V-shaped leaf tip, right? Very easy to use. And next, we did our little cactuses, right? So the ones that are on our cupcakes. And we used a 21 tip. So this is a large open, it's a large open star tip, right? And that's what we used with that dark green for those little cactuses. And then if you want to finish them with some spikes or flowers, we used a number 1 tip or 2 tip, whatever works for you, right? So just nice tiny round. And then I used a 16, but you could also use like a 14. So just another open star tip that's smaller to do those little stars on top to give you those little cactus blossoms. All right. And then for our little Echeveria style ones, we used just a regular petal tip. I've used my 104 for the small ones, and also my 125 for the largest. So the 125 is going directly on the cupcake and piping a really nice big one. For my Gasteria style ones, so these are the ones with the kind of flatter, chunky, wedge-shaped petals, I just used my 101, but instead of making petals like I normally would, I used it the way I would my leaf tip. So it's just a different use for the same kind of tip. And then finally, I used a number 5 tip to do the little spikes that are kind of like the Haworthia style. So that covers the tips. And as you can see, it's a great, easy way to make a little succulent garden. We hope you all enjoyed this class. And if you liked what you enjoyed today, you will go ahead and subscribe to our channel and check out more videos and tune in for future live sessions. And I'll check with Tom to see if there's any more questions. He's shaking his head no. So we will call it a day and say thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.